Thank you for joining us today for Jennifer Schaus and Associates in our Webinar Wednesday program. We are coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Our webinars are every Wednesday and are provided complimentary. They are recorded and can be downloaded from our website and YouTube channel, which now holds over 300 of our government contracting webinars. In the interest of time, we do not take questions, so if you have questions for our speaker, we will have her information on the last slide of the presentation today. A special thanks to our educational sponsor, the National Veteran Small Business Coalition, for making these webinars possible. The NVSBC is the largest nonprofit trade association for veterans. Please visit their website for more information. And now a little bit about us. We work with U.S. federal government contractors, including product, service, and software firms. Our services range from market analysis reports to contract vehicles and compliance. More information is on our website. On April 20th, we will have a general contractors spring networking meeting on from 5:30 to 7:30 on April 20th at the Kennedy Center. You can meet with over 150 federal contractors. Please register on our website under the Events tab. We also have opportunities for your organization to advertise in our newsletter. We now reach almost 17,000 subscribers, and this includes both contractors and government. Contact us for more pricing information with the email shown on your screen. And now to introduce our speaker, Rose Stern. Welcome, Rose. We're glad to have you with us today, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. If you could go to the next slide, please. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for OTA, Who Needs the FAR? OTA stands for Other Transaction Agreement. Slide number 1, please. Let's take a look at our agenda and the takeaways that you can expect from our session today. We're going to consider some of the differences between federal acquisition regulation or FAR-based government procurement and non-FAR-based OTA acquisitions. We're also going to look at some of the benefits and burdens or contractor risks associated with the OTA acquisition vehicle so your company can make an informed decision on whether OTA should be part of your business development plan. We're going to close our session today with some strategic considerations. Slide number 2, please. OTAs are legally binding contracts referred to as agreements to distinguish them from procurement contracts governed by procurement statutes. There are many methods or vehicles for the United States government to buy or acquire certain goods and services. Vehicles include procurement-based methods under the Federal Acquisition Regulation, like FAR-based multiple award contracting or schedules, and non-FAR-based acquisition as opposed to procurement. Congress granted authority for government non-FAR-based acquisition through the OTA vehicle with the original intent of granting certain agencies, including NASA and the Department of Defense, we'll refer to as DoD, two really important benefits. One is flexibility, and 2 is speed. Conversely, contractors enjoy those benefits as well as part of this vehicle. The vehicle was primarily intended for acquiring research, development, and exploration. Next slide, please, number 3. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and I think that aptly describes this graphic brought to us by the Defense Acquisition University. It shows a fan of all, or the most popular procurement and acquisition vehicles. And just so you can get a bearing as to what we're going to be talking about today, if you look at the green part of the fan, you'll see the first band that says non-FAR-based acquisition OTAs. Slide number 4, please. Increased DoD spending on OTA agreements is another big benefit for contractors. In recent years, DoD has increased spending threefold, especially in the area of prototype projects. This picture shows a translation of that increase by award and also dollars spent. This graphic was included in GAO's November 2019 report to Congress related to transactions for prototype projects. GAO found that OTAs were particularly useful in demonstrating whether technologies and products could be adapted to DoD use. Slide number 5. Generally, DoD can use other transaction authority in 3 main purposes. conducting research, developing prototypes, or follow-on production of a successful prototype project. Research OTAs, if you want to look them up and you're taking notes, are authorized under 10 U.S.C. 2371, and they're primarily used for basic, applied, and advanced research projects. Depending on the terms negotiated, these projects may allow contractors to fund their research and development. This is another important contractor benefit. The government intended that these research and development projects would increase dual-use R&D and also reduce government regulatory overhead for small, innovative contractors. Looking at purpose number 2, prototype OTAs, they're authorized under 10 U.S.C. 2371B to allow the government to acquire prototype capabilities and allow for future production OTAs. Both dual-use and defense-specific projects are encouraged. Purpose number 3, production OTs. Production OTs are authorized under 10 U.S.C. 2371B subsection F, and they may be awarded without competition as a follow-on OT to a prototype OT agreement, provided the agreement was competitively awarded and it's successfully completed. Slide number 6. So just to catch up and pause and recalibrate for a second, here's a summary of what we talked about so far. Some of the benefits for contractors: flexibility in contracting terms. That also includes cost sharing for your research and development, speed and shortened acquisition schedules, possible decrease in compliance requirements, and most of our clients think growing market is the main draw for them. On the flip side, it's also interesting to note that the government gains important additional benefits from these types of purchases as well. Supporting dual-use projects, greater commercial collaboration and innovation, leverage of commercial industry investment in technology, and the capability to partner with industry and foster new relationships for non-traditional defense contractors, which you'll see the acronym NDC. Now that we talked about what an OTA is, and we looked at some of the benefits to both contractors and the government, we're going to switch gears and move to the next section of our agenda to talk about how these contract benefits are achieved. Slide number 7. Speed and flexibility of this vehicle comes from many factors, but one is the exclusion of many of the FAR-based legal requirements. Contractors should be aware that the government can flow down or include FAR provisions even though they're not mandatory. Examples of laws that do not apply include the Truth in Negotiations Act, the Competition and Contracting Act, often referred to as CICA, Cost Accounting Standards, Contracts Disputes Act, and certain intellectual property statutes, for example, the Bayh-Dole Act. OTAs, as I said earlier, are not mandatorily subject to the FAR or its supplements. They are, however, bound by other statutory and regulatory requirements that are not generally procurement specific under Titles 10 or 41. Slide number 8. OTAs can be structured in numerous ways, and I've laid out 5 of the most common that we see. The 2 that are used most often, though, are numbers 1 and 5, a direct relationship with a single government agency and a single provider, and number 5, through consortiums. Our clients often ask us, where can we find these opportunities? Direct opportunities may be found on FedBizOpps, now called sambeta.gov. Also, indirect awards may include those made by consortium notice to members. Consortia, including those sponsored by the Office of Secretary of Defense, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, Defense Logistics, or DLA, and there's also non-DoD sponsored consortia. In addition, opportunities may arise from unsolicited proposals. Number 9. Focusing on the consortium model we were just talking about and how that model increases the speed of the schedule of procurement. Unlike a typical procurement schedule under the FAR that involves generation of a solicitation with formal responses and proposal rules, the OTA consortium acquisition process is typically shorter and may have only a two-step process. So looking back at the bullets on the slide, the government basically communicates a problem or a goal that it's trying to solve, and interested consortium members simply submit a white paper including their solutions. Members may also submit unsolicited technology suggestions and solutions to solve a defined challenge. One goal of the consortium model is to encourage entities to work together, especially on R&D projects. Members of a consortium often pool resources in collaboration with DoD. Slide number 10. So does all this increased collaboration mean there's no competition? The short answer is no. SECA does not apply. However, the government is required to complete research and prototype projects to the maximum extent practical. Slide number 11. A consortium is an organized group that performs administrative and facilitative functions for its members. They may facilitate multi-party agreements such that each member is a co-prime contractor. Consortium entities consist of nonprofit, academic institution, or contractors, and they typically focus on specific technology areas. How does this decrease burden? Well, decreased burden on government contributes to speed, flexibility, and in some cases, a decrease in compliance. The decreased burden stems from delegation of these administrative functions to consortium and decreased requirements in acquisition processing. For example, a less formal solicitation process. So that frees up the contracts officer and all of his or her team in many of these instances. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to recap again. We have those benefits that we talked about. We've also now covered how these benefits are achieved, or at least some of the most common ways we've seen them being achieved. And next, we're going to look at burdens or contractor risks associated with OTA so that you can get a balanced view of the structure. Slide number 13. We often assist clients in mitigating contractor risks, especially during negotiation and prior to actual award. Being proactive is always very important. So what are these burdens and risks that we should be looking out for? Uncertainty in the negotiated terms, potential lack of protections associated with unequal bargaining power, and uncertainty in dispute resolution or other processes. Slide number 14. Even though OTAs are not governed by the FAR, the government may, and often does, incorporate both FAR and other non-traditional terms. Even though the FAR may be burdensome, contractors at least understand the rules. And if you've been a contractor for any period of time and you've had multiple contracts, most contractors can cite to the FAR by numbers of the regulation. For example, under the FAR, selecting a contract type is generally a matter of negotiation between your contract officer and the contractor. And the government is required to exercise sound judgment under the FAR. Negotiating the contract type and negotiating prices are closely related, and the contract officer considers them both in making his or her decision. The contracting officer objective under the FAR is to negotiate a contract type and price, or estimated cost and fee, that will result in reasonable contractor risk to provide the contractor with the greatest incentive for efficient and economic performance. This obligation or objective under the FAR is an example of the protections that are somewhat built into the FAR for contractors. And this particular principle doesn't apply to OTA acquisitions, and this is just an example. Next slide. As we talked about, OTA terms are highly customized, and contractors should carefully review terms like IP and data rights, damages, limitation of liability, termination, change notices, change in control, and we will provide on our last slide a summary of some of those terms that you should be looking at carefully. Does the dispute process create any contractor risk? That's our next question. Traditional procurement contracts are subject to FAR dispute clauses and the Contract Disputes Act, often called the CDA. Although these provisions are very mechanical and often burdensome, they do provide predictability of outcome, as the process includes the contract officer final decision and an appeal through the Boards of Contract Appeal or the Court of Federal Claims. OTAs are not subject to the FAR or the CDA, and as a result, the remedy and the process for disputes that applies is often found in the negotiated agreement itself. So many clients call and say, where can I find the dispute? How do I bring up a change? I'm looking at the FAR, and so you have to be directed to your actual contract with the government in these cases. Slide number 16. So as I talked a little bit about uncertainty as it relates to disputes, we're assisting clients with disputes pre-litigation, and we also have litigations in this area. So I wanted to run over some of the jurisdictional uncertainty at this point. As a general matter, GAO lacks jurisdiction to review protests of solicitations or awards because OTAs are not procurement agreements or contracts. However, GAO established that it does have jurisdiction related to whether the agency complied with the underlying OTA enabling statute. The U.S. Court of Federal Claims has also very recently found that it lacks jurisdiction to hear the merits of a challenge to award of an OTA. This case is ongoing, and it's been transferred to the Central District of California for review under the Administrative Procedures Act. Because OTAs are not procurement contracts, district courts have generally started reviewing agency awards under the APA or the Administrative Procedures Act. So summing all of this up, unlike procurement-based disputes governed by the FAR and Contracts Disputes Act, due to the highly negotiated nature of these contract terms and a lack of precedent in the area, there's less certainty in predicting outcomes related to OTA disputes and litigation from a business standpoint. This decreases contractor visibility and potentially increases risk in making good business decisions as to whether or not to dispute. Next slide. So we've reached our final recap, as I promised. We have a final summary of the benefits and risks we've talked about so far. On the left side, the benefits, we have growing market, which I put at the top because that's what I'm hearing is the biggest draw to this vehicle. Flexibility in contract terms, possible decrease in compliance requirements, and speed and shortening of the acquisition schedule. On the risk side, dispute process is less certain. Even though the FAR may be burdensome, contractors understand the rules that include the reasonable risk sharing rule that we talked about earlier. OTA terms may be highly customized, and contractors should carefully review and consider risk sharing when negotiating terms. Here are some of the terms that we see disputes arising in most often: IP and data rights, licensing, damages, limitations of liability, the flow-down terms, including those that are added from the FAR, termination, changes, notice, including change of control and assignment, and that's important if you're planning to sell your company in the near future, disputes, consequential damages, cyber incidents reporting, indemnity, and export. Next slide. This is our last slide. And based on my earlier comments that cite other important benefits to the government, especially greater commercial collaboration and innovation, and the ability for the government to leverage industry investment in technology, I want to take the last couple minutes to talk a little bit about intellectual property. The inventor protections included in the Bayh-Dole Act for patents and 10 U.S.C. 2320-21 for technical data do not apply to OTA programs. Parties are free to negotiate terms related to IP. Contractors should highlight the proposed terms for close review and negotiation. As part of the negotiation strategy, DoD agreement officers are encouraged to negotiate short-term and long-term plans with contractors, even 5 years and beyond. for new or innovative intellectual property especially. So on the converse, contractors are highly encouraged to create a plan that complements the contractor's short and long-term goals and have that plan in mind during the negotiation phase. Contractors should consider carefully reviewing and negotiating all government proposed terms if they disagree. The government and contractors are free to negotiate unique terms in this instance, including areas like royalty terms, licenses limited by scope, duration, or manner, the term, or other options, rights of first refusal, and exclusive dealing arrangements. As part of the negotiating strategy and plan, contractors should consider and discuss with the government the likely production and follow-on support of any prototype developed. Proactively, and even before discussions with the government, contractors are advised to analyze this long-term benefit of the agreement versus your investment and the risks that are borne by each party. This includes investment in past research and development and protection of that. Also, because the government tends to use IP much longer than commercial sector, contractors should anticipate that the government will request extensions of maintenance and even unsupported IP as part of the long-term plan. Contractors should research and be prepared with the understanding of the cost to this extended maintenance and support that may not even be possible. For example, if you are using unsupported vendor IP, or it might require a very substantial investment. That's the end of our slides for today, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Rose, for a great presentation and sharing your time with us. Thanks to everyone who joined us. The recording will be on our website and YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. Please join us this Friday as we cover each part of the FAR, and join us next Wednesday for more hot topics in federal contracting.